In 2021, Drake represented 0.8% of every music stream in America. 1 in 121 plays were his music. To put that into perspective, every song released before 1980 represented only 0.6%. That's one person outstreaming a significant part of the entire history of music. He's a giant, and he's only gotten bigger since then. At that time, he had just passed 50 billion total streams, but in the 3 years since then, he's added another 50, becoming in 2024 the first artist to ever pass 100 billion streams on Spotify. No one else comes close to representing that type of value. So it makes sense that Drake's record deals would also be huge. We know that he signed a $400 million contract with UMG in 2022, by far the biggest in music history. In fact, that was about twice as high as the previous biggest record deal of all time. But in a seemingly unrelated twist of fate, 2024 was a rough year for Drake. He's always been a controversial figure, with lots of people feeling that he doesn't represent hip-hop well, or he lacks the character and depth to be a real music legend. But at the same time, he's only kept growing and growing without any sign of losing the #1 spot of biggest rapper alive. That is until Kendrick Lamar, who literally has his picture in the dictionary for authentic rapper, spent a month calling him a pedophile, deadbeat dad, loser, and colonizer on 8 different genres of diss track. While Drake's career obviously wasn't over, at this point he's definitely too big to fail, a lot of the enthusiasm around his music went down. True or not, the rumors stuck. One of them being that Drake was a sore loser with a sour personality. Maybe he wasn't really a pedophile or a human trafficker, but if people felt he was petty, immature, and creepy, that might as well be just as bad for his optics.
Or he's a selfish, lying, manipulative sack of who has made enemies for 15 years, and now we're here at the boiling point.
Because ever since that beef, Drake hasn't been the same. The fun has died down to a degree. He's been vague posting, ranting at shows.
You're gonna come to a point in life where people you thought were friends, they might stab you in the back, they might do a lot of things to you. Sometimes it's you and you alone by yourself.
Calling people out who have nothing to do with him. Overall, just not taking it that great.
Guy's like a fragile op, but it's a good song though.
But now, out of nowhere, Drake has filed a bombshell legal petition that makes several very bold claims. So bold that the entire music industry could be thrown into question if even half of what he's saying turns out to be true. But it's a tricky situation. On the one hand, it's not hard to believe that Drake's claims could be entirely true. We know the music industry will do just about anything they can do to exploit or take advantage of their artists. Even the biggest artist on their rosters not being immune to bad deals or worse. But at the same time, the fact that it's Drake telling this side of the story makes the whole situation a lot more questionable. His track record with business and public relationships is far from good, and the way that this is being presented seems to only make that worse.
It's a bad look, and it's all smeared on Drake. This is hip hop, man. Somebody comes at you with lyrics, with a song, you're supposed to come right back at them with the song.
So there's a complicated situation in front of us. It might be that Drake is a sore loser, only making it worse.
Drake, he got you. It's okay, bro. You Drake.
Or the label might really be conspiring to take him down to save a couple of bucks.
A label is not supposed to pick sides. If these niggas was helping them, that's foul.
Either way, there's a complex web of relationships, brands, public images, and evidence that needs to be carefully looked at to separate fact from fiction, to see who or what is really pulling the strings behind these big cultural moments and why. If you're interested in more of my creations, we just launched a brand new set of pendants from our brand Spirit World that we designed from scratch. All of them are made from solid 925 sterling silver with hand-painted details, and they all tell a meaningful story. These are necklaces for artists, creators, people on a mission who need a reminder to just keep going until they reach their goals. If you want to support my work and buy a necklace, feel free to pick one up at the link below at spiritworld.store. Plus, shipping is always free in the US. On November 25th, 2024, Drake filed a petition requesting depositions of Universal Music Group and iHeartMedia as part of Texas's Rule 202. It's not a lawsuit in itself, but instead it's a way to gather information and identify weaknesses before he officially goes after a court case. From the website of a local law firm explaining how this works as a special law specifically in Texas, it says this: while most states allow some form of pre-suit discovery, Texas has the broadest provisions for pre-suit depositions in the country. Rule 202 is commonly used to identify potential defendants, collect evidence of non-compete violations or trade secret misappropriation, evaluate a case's potential value, or assess the scope of liability and damages. The filing itself makes some pretty insane claims that are actually ground-shaking if they're true. In just a few pages, it explains how and why UMG would care about what's going on here and how and why they would get involved. It says, UMG is one of a handful of companies that dominate the multi-billion-dollar music industry. When it comes to the release of new music by its most prominent artists, UMG is meticulous in its planning and execution of the music it releases, promotes, and backs with its considerable financial resources. That is true not just because of the amount of money on the line for UMG and its shareholders, but also because UMG's executives are eligible to receive incentive bonuses based on the revenue generated by their respective divisions. Then it gets back to where it all started. Drake's lawyers wrote this. Earlier this year, one of the artists that UMG has under contract presented UMG with a new song called Not Like Us. Before it approved the release of the song, UMG knew that the song itself, as well as its accompanying album art and music video, attacked the character of another one of UMG's most prominent artists, Drake, by falsely accusing him of being a sex offender, engaging in pedophilic acts, harboring sex offenders, and committing other criminal sexual acts. Specifically, the song calls Drake a certified pedophile, a predator, and someone whose name should be registered and placed on neighborhood watch. That's the heart of the issue here, because Kendrick and Drake are both technically signed to the same company. While they're managed on a day-to-day basis by totally separate labels, UMG gets a cut of and controls both of their output at a high level. It certainly seems like it could be a conflict of interest to allow one of their artists to do something to the other that could harm the business overall. That doesn't sound like something that would be good for their relationship with Drake at all. And sure, that's one thing. But then the bomb drops. It says, UMG designed, financed, and then executed a plan to turn Not Like Us into a viral mega hit, with the intent of using the spectacle of harm to Drake and his businesses to drive consumer hysteria, and of course, massive revenues. And that plan succeeded, likely beyond UMG's wildest expectations. Essentially, what Drake is saying is that not only did his label do him dirty, but UMG also used illegal, corrupt methods to massively boost Not Like Us, making a huge amount of money at his expense in the process. But how and why would they do that to their own client? The how is seemingly simple. The papers say UMG made covert payments to a number of platforms, including radio stations, to play and promote Not Like Us without disclosing those payments to listeners. This practice, known as payola, is prohibited by the Communications Act of 1934 and has been the subject of regulatory scrutiny. Basically, Drake is saying that UMG broke the law to push Not Like Us and make it bigger. And this part is entirely possible to be true. Payola refers to the illegal practice of paying radio stations, DJs, or music influencers to play or react to specific songs without disclosing these payments as sponsorships. This has been a problem for over 100 years, with payola gaining significant notoriety in the 1950s and 60s when investigations revealed that record labels were secretly bribing radio personalities to boost their artist airplay on a massive scale, often at the expense of listeners' preferences or demand. This has long been a problem that undermines fair competition in the music industry, distorting the market by prioritizing financial influence over artistic merit and listener interest, and stifling opportunities for emerging artists who lack the resources to compete. And while FCC rules and laws and regulations have tried to curb payola in recent years, modern variations of this practice persist in the form of undisclosed playlist placements and influencer promotions. Basically, the music industry is corrupt, it always has been, it probably always will be, and it wouldn't be surprising that UMG would do this for Not Like Us, because they probably do it for most of their music in general. Drake's filing even showed that UMG had been ordered to pay tens of millions of dollars as recently as 10 years ago for payola offenses. It says that Drake knows of at least one UMG employee paying independent radio promoters who then paid stations and radio employees to play Not Like Us. Even more than that though, Drake's team is saying that the wave of streamers and critics reviewing Not Like Us was part of the plan too. It says petitioner has received information that UMG also paid third-party influencers to promote Not Like Us, creating incentives for high-visibility influencers to spread Not Like Us in a radical departure from long-standing internal policy by removing copyright restrictions so the influencers could make money from their videos. Basically, Drake is saying that UMG, with the help of iHeartMedia, used corrupt, illegal tactics to conspire against him for their own benefit. But that isn't all. Another petition was filed just 24 hours later against UMG and Spotify, again telling a very similar story of corruption and unethical business practices. practices. It says, in 2024, UMG did not rely on chance or even ordinary business practices to break through the noise on Spotify and likely other music platforms as well. It instead launched a campaign to manipulate and saturate streaming services with the song Not Like Us in order to make that song go viral using bots and pay-to-play agreements. On information and belief, UMG charged Spotify licensing rates 30% lower than its usual licensing rate for Not Like Us in exchange for Spotify affirmatively recommending the song to users who were searching for other unrelated songs and artists. Neither UMG nor Spotify disclosed that Spotify had received compensation of any kind in exchange for recommending the song. It also alleges that a whistleblower revealed that UMG paid him $5,000 to put bots on the song to artificially inflate its plays, but Section 18 might be one of the most revealing parts of this document as a whole. It says, Drake has received information that UMG has been taking steps in an apparent effort to conceal its schemes, including but not limited to terminating employees associated with or perceived as having loyalty to Drake. Indeed, UMG has demonstrated that it has no interest in taking responsibility for its conduct. Over the past several months, Drake has repeatedly sought to engage UMG in discussions to resolve the ongoing harm he has suffered, but UMG has refused to engage, insisting that UMG is not responsible for its own actions. Instead, UMG has pointed the finger at Mr. Duckworth, Kendrick Lamar, insisting that Drake should initiate legal action against Mr. Duckworth himself rather than UMG, and even threatened to bring its own legal claims against Kendrick Lamar if Drake were to pursue claims against UMG. Basically, the petition is saying that UMG told Drake they have no interest in discussing the topic and that they would sue Kendrick Lamar if Drake sued them. Both of these petitions are signed directly, at the very bottom, by Aubrey Drake Graham. Let's break it down. Drake wants to sue his own label for conspiring to illegally, unethically push Kendrick's diss track for their own gain at his expense. But why does Drake think they would do that specifically to hurt him? What makes this different than the corruption that almost every major figure in the record industry takes advantage of whenever they can? Like, for example, the time that Drake coordinated with Spotify to put his face on the cover of every single playlist on the platform when he dropped Scorpion in 2018. Are these Not Like Us allegations a selfish act of greed by the label, or a total fabrication by a poor loser? Or is there really something much darker under the surface? Why is Drake trying to sue his own record label? If you let Drake fans tell the story, it's pretty obvious that this situation is a whole lot deeper than it looks on the surface. The theory that's really gaining traction on his side is that UMG orchestrated this not just for their own gain, but because they needed him to fail because he had gotten so big they didn't want to pay what they owed him for his next record deal. Like I mentioned earlier, Drake's last record deal was $400 million, and apparently he made it back fast enough that he was in for another even bigger deal as soon as next year. And so now, after this news has come out, Drake fans all over the internet have started connecting dots to say that not only did UMG turn their back on Drake to make a quick payout on Not Like Us, but it was actually a giant plan all along to save money by hurting his career. So they could turn around and say, look, Drake, you lost the beef, your stock is down, no one listens to your music right now, we can't do $500 million anymore. Now, this isn't included in his petition at all, but when you go online, you can see thousands of people trying to connect Drake's lyrics from the past few years to the possibility that he might be dealing with a much bigger battle than Kendrick or Metro Boomin making a few diss songs could even begin to explain. If that were true, the implications are mind-blowing. And so, according to his hardcore supporters, Drake is about to expose one of the biggest controversies of the modern music industry and shine a spotlight on an insane web of corruption and exploitation. And honestly, these people might have a point. This isn't something that hasn't happened before. Michael Jackson's entire career was marked by a tense relationship with Sony, his record label, and during a particularly difficult moment in their partnership, Sony essentially sabotaged the release of his 2001 album Invincible, a $30 million project that ended up being the most expensive album ever made. In the early 2000s, the relationship between Sony and Michael Jackson completely broke down when he found out that Sony had lied about ownership of his master recordings, having made a plan to keep control of his records 10 years longer than they initially promised. Shortly after that, he also discovered that the lawyer who originally helped him sign his contracts 10 years earlier had secretly been working with Sony the whole time. Internal negotiations over this issue resulted in Sony canceling the album's singles and marketing, which led to Michael Jackson publicly calling Sony's CEO a racist mobster devil on various occasions.
We can't let them get away with what they're trying to do because... So I'm leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony. They're very angry at me because of it, but I just did good business, you know. The way they get revenge is to try and destroy my album. And Tommy Mottola is a devil.
Basically, it's nothing new that the music industry will literally do whatever it takes to profit from artists, even if it means sabotaging their star artist to maintain control. If it could happen to Michael Jackson, it could literally happen to anybody. And rumors around Drake being in a bad deal with Universal have been going around for a while, with lots of people saying that Drake might be in a slave deal and might have been told to fuck off after trying to negotiate with people in charge at UMG when he realized he was worth way more than the huge deal already paid. And so now Drake is in a pretty insane predicament, a much riskier, much more difficult to prove situation. Given the history and the evidence, it's totally possible that his label might want to bring him down in some way. Any relationship with $500 million on the line is going to be complicated, and there are countless examples of labels doing people dirty for their own self-interest. It literally happened to Michael Jackson. But if it turns out there isn't really a case here and that the conspiracies are just conspiracies, Drake won't ever be seen the same way again. There's a phenomenon called the Streisand effect that describes the unintended consequences of an attempt to hide or remove information, where instead of the attempt working, the attempt itself ends up creating massive public awareness of what they were trying to hide in the first place. It's named after the time that Barbra Streisand tried to stop the publication of a photo showing her giant mansion in California, and instead just ended up making the photo hugely famous by accident. Before her lawsuit against the photographer, the picture only had 5 views online. After, it was over 450,000. And that's exactly the problem that's sitting in front of Drake right now. After he brutally lost the beef against Kendrick, with Not Like Us having almost 1 billion Spotify streams and staying on the charts for 30 weeks, not only is Kendrick's victory lap going on for longer than anyone thought was possible, creating a genuine hit around shitting on Drake, but as a result, Drake has spiraled a little bit beyond what someone in his position can afford to do. And what he's doing now could genuinely be the nail in the coffin. It was already bad enough that he lost the most anticipated hip-hop beef of the decade, but if you have to add, and then he tried and failed to sue the guy who won at the end, that's even worse. But at the same time, it's not a huge surprise he's gotten to this point. Watching Drake try to move on from this beef has been pretty bad, but the situation he's in now started quite a while ago. The world didn't love For All the Dogs when it came out back in 2023, with a lot of people calling it unfocused and repetitive. It was pretty clear that a new phase might be coming for Drake's career, with him tending more towards one-dimensional toxic masculinity in his music and declining quality in his albums over the last few projects. It almost felt like he was only still the biggest rapper in the game because there was no one else out to challenge him, not because anyone truly loved what he was putting out. With some people calling it Drake fatigue, it seemed like the music community was just getting a bit tired of his antics and persona over the last few kind of repetitive albums he had released. A lot of people didn't love the way he was dissing Megan Thee Stallion, beefing with Rihanna for seemingly no good reason, approaching his late 30s with seemingly backwards growth in his songwriting. When Kendrick showed up at Drake's door as the hip-hop boogeyman coming to take his name, he didn't even have to have an ace up his sleeve. This wasn't Pusha T revealing that Drake was hiding a kid from the world back in 2018. All Kendrick had to do was leverage what a lot of people already felt was true, talking about Drake being into young women, making fun of his racial identity, calling him a colonizer. These are conversations that had already been going on for a long time. Kendrick was just presenting it in a fun, catchy way for the rest of the world to sing along to, because Drake had become bigger than ever in the last couple of years. But that also meant his flaws were more on display as well. Of course, Drake's side of the beef wasn't half bad either. Push-Ups and Family Matters were good tracks, and sure, they were full of shit that was just made up, but so were Kendrick's songs. Ultimately though, it didn't matter. When Kendrick dropped Meet the Grams just a few minutes after Family Matters, overshadowing a pretty good diss track with an insane dissection of Drake's existence, and then putting out Not Like Us the next morning as a knockout punch, it was over. Ultimately, Drake lost. Kendrick's songs were sharper, his bars were angrier, and like I said, the world was ready to see Drake lose. Hating on Drake was funny. A lot of Drake's friends were seen bumping Not Like Us. It was being played on TV and at sports games. Kendrick was even announced to headline Super Bowl 59 in the wake of the song's success. The entire world united to laugh at Drake, and in return, he hasn't been able to do much more than pop out at a few shows, drop some throwaways, and keep his head down, while Kendrick does a victory lap all over the media. A big part of that is the fact that no one sees Drake as someone to root for. His success got boring. And now the problem for Drake is that he didn't take it super well. He's going on XQC's stream saying he's fully intact and that they need facts to take him out and fairy tales won't do it, but literally he is taken out right now.
Me, I do music, in case you didn't know. I'm here, as you can see, fully intact. Mind, body, and soul, in case you were wondering. Right?
Mind, body, and soul.
Mind, body, and soul. You need facts to take me out. Fairy tales won't do it.
Kendrick is dancing on his grave with new music, new videos, big shows, big hits, and Drake isn't. Instead, he's having Lil Yachty go on podcasts and put out propaganda calling him unfazed and unbothered.
He didn't give a fuck.
Really?
No, he was genuinely unfazed. I respected it a lot, and I talked to him. That shit didn't bother him, you know. And then to a point where I just stopped talking to him about it because I felt like I was the one bringing him the negativity. Like I was bringing the cloud when I would be like, oh man, I hate that this person said this. And I was showing him shit he hadn't seen.
He's sitting around putting out petty little Instagram stories, dissing people on kick streams, and pretending to be unbothered, while the entire time he's actually been fighting his label tooth and nail to apologize or pay him back for letting his career get damaged by the beef with Kendrick. The narrative around Drake after this beef has been entirely about him not taking the loss in a normal way. And so it all comes back to the Streisand effect. If Drake said nothing after this beef, eventually everyone would move on, he would release music again, the fans would be happy, the haters would get bored, and there wouldn't be much to worry about. But if he files this lawsuit, it comes right back into the spotlight, and Drake gets proven to be a petty, whiny, annoying loser again. Suddenly, the story of his beef with Kendrick would be twice as long, stretching out over an entire year, only for it to be 2 massive L's instead of just 1. Unless, of course, the theory that UMG was trying to sabotage Drake to get out of paying him more is true, in which case, it's one of the craziest conspiracies in modern music history being unveiled in real time. It's a giant gamble where Drake either makes himself look like a martyr who is being victimized by his label or like a giant idiot. But public perception about Drake right now is bad enough that even if he is right and is the victim of a plot against him, a lot of people just don't really care to hear that out. Instead, a lot of people are actually siding with the label, which isn't something I thought I'd ever say in the year 2024. Everybody knows record labels are bad, abusive, exploitative companies. But right now, no one seems to care. UMG's first statement in response to Drake's filing was short and simple. They said, "The suggestion that UMG would do anything to undermine any of its artists is offensive and untrue. We employ the highest ethical practices in our marketing and promotions, and no amount of contrived and absurd legal arguments in this submission can mask the fact that fans choose the music they want to hear." Essentially, this is the corporate speak version of what literally everyone else said the second they saw Drake's filing. Who cares, dude? Not Like Us was a hit. You lost, move on. And so at the end of the day, even if Drake has a point, the way that he's gone about this entire situation leading up to now makes him seem so petty and immature that that's all anyone can see. Even if there is corruption or something unfair going on, he's sitting so much in the shadow of his own bullshit that no one cares. I mean, if even DJ Academics starts recognizing that Drake is probably doing more harm than good right now, with projections for the first week sales on Kendrick's new album going up after this news came out.
Yo, I'm gonna have to holler at my nigga Drake, man. This shit's getting out of fucking hand, bruh. I told y'all that fucking lawsuit was just fucking worst timing. Fuck nigga Kendrick now expected to sell 325. Bruv!
When you start to look a little deeper, it becomes obvious that even Drake's petition is kind of petty and strange, and it seems almost ill-advised in a lot of ways. Looking at the actual details of these papers, the theories and ideas around why Drake is really doing this start to fall apart, and it makes Drake look pretty bad. One of the weirdest things in it is how they named multiple content creators and outright accused them of taking payments from record labels in exchange for reacting to Not Like Us. They literally name NFR. It says, petitioner understands that UMG paid the popular NFR podcast, which has 300,000 subscribers on YouTube and 330,000 followers on X, to promote Not Like Us and its video without disclosing the payment. As part of its deal with UMG, the NFR podcast published podcast episodes, tweets, and other content about the song. But that just doesn't make a lot of sense. The NFR guys are commentators, just like every other content creator who covers music news and new music. They're going to cover the most popular songs at the moment. That's their business, and of course that makes it more popular in turn, but that's the nature of what they do. They would do that even if they weren't supposedly getting paid by the label. And I think this section of Drake's petition gets to the bottom of what he's really getting at. Section 17 and 18 say this: UMG's schemes to artificially inflate the popularity of Not Like Us were motivated, at least partially, by the desire of executives at Interscope to maximize their own profits. UMG executives have an annual incentive program pursuant to which they are rewarded for meeting and surpassing sales and profits projections, among other metrics. The incentives are largely based on a specific UMG division rather than the performance of UMG generally. Thus, on information and belief, Mr. Janik and other executives at Interscope have been incentivized to maximize the financial success of Not Like Us and its revitalizing impact on Kendrick's prior recording catalog, including his first 5 studio albums, which are owned by Interscope. Streaming and licensing is a zero-sum game. Every time a song breaks through, it means another artist does not. UMG's choice to saturate the music market with Not Like Us comes at the expense of its other artists, like Drake. Petitioner suffered economic harm as a result of UMG's scheme. Drake is essentially saying that UMG shouldn't have let Kendrick Lamar publish his song because it hurt Drake's income by making him less popular, and that his label shouldn't be allowed to do that. Like it says, Petitioner suffered economic harm as a result of UMG's scheme. This particular part puts a lot of the rest of this filing into perspective, talking about corrupt pay-to-play practices being used against him, saying the label is defaming him by allowing Kendrick to call him a pedophile. It starts to look a lot more like he's just mad about Not Like Us being successful than actually having a solid case against his label. Because it's pretty clear they didn't actually do anything against him, they just let another client do something he wanted to do already and didn't stop him. Because why would UMG not let Kendrick do what he wants? He's a client of theirs as well. Why would Drake get special treatment and have UMG stop a song from coming out that hurts him? Wouldn't it hurt Kendrick Lamar if they stopped it? That's the heart of the issue here. And I think it is a fair complaint. If my agent went out and got a deal for someone else that resulted in me losing money, I'd be mad. But the thing is, Kendrick and Drake are both in business with UMG, making them tied to each other in a way that could easily result in this sort of issue. A bunch of legal experts have already weighed in on the case. One lawyer said, "I don't really understand how that would create leverage to cancel a recording contract. When faced with popular sentiment that Drake may be set to argue that Universal breached his contract by artificially promoting Not Like Us, the lawyer noted that would essentially be saying that Universal is obligated not to market Kendrick's music because Drake finds it undermining. I don't think Drake would stand for that either." Basically, yes, UMG might have indirectly hurt Drake, but it's also their job to help Kendrick just as much as it is to help Drake. And they can't be held accountable for Kendrick winning the beef, just like it wouldn't be their job to stop Drake from beating Kendrick if it were the opposite. Brian Z from AudioMac summed it up perfectly. He said, "No amount of money in the world is worth the reputational harm that Drake is causing to himself by filing these suits. If Drake had learned Kendrick was about to release a record making these claims and he filed a suit to block the song's release, that would make sense. But the song is out and it's been out. The whole world has heard it. Filing these suits serves as a reminder to the world." And then in the end, the lawyer said this: "The streaming bots and the pay-to-play thing, assuming he feels strongly that there's some documentation and could prove it, ultimately it still doesn't change anything about this battle. The average consumer isn't going to say, oh, Kendrick paid for bots and therefore Drake actually won." Basically, Drake put himself in a corner. After the beef, people around the world now see him as a petty, kind of weak character who lost a big battle and couldn't handle it. Now he's making some very shaky claims about whether or not it was a fair fight, but unless he had some insane slam dunk reveal, all this is going to do is make him look even more like the thing he doesn't want to be seen as. Of course, that's not even to mention the fact that Drake himself has been benefiting from the type of practices he's now complaining about for years. I mean, even Kanye said it. Lucien Grange, the CEO of UMG, is Drake's rich baby daddy.
They say rich baby daddy, it's like Drake has a rich baby daddy named Lucien and Universal. He's like, like, man, my daddy got it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, my daddy controlled the spins. My daddy got the DSPs. My daddy, Drake has a rich baby daddy.
We know how successful Drake has been. We know how massive his record deals are. We know that the record label has prioritized him for over 10 years, helping him achieve 13 #1 albums. But now it's not allowed because they let someone else win for once? Now the game is rigged because it's no longer rigged just in his favor? At the end of the day, Not Like Us was a massive hit. You couldn't go anywhere for months without hearing this beat blasting out of someone's car window. Kendrick's diss songs were sinister, dark, and entertaining, and fun, and danceable. Like I said, there were a million reasons why people just came together to make fun of Drake. It's not that people really thought he was a pedophile, or at least most people didn't, but people were tired enough of Drake being so dominant in the industry that it didn't matter. Kendrick came at the right time to harness people's energy and make a hit. Whether or not Drake is out of his mind and destroying his own legacy because he's salty about losing or not, it seems like that's what's gonna happen anyway. Kendrick and Drake's beef got ugly enough to the point where both of them will now have a very difficult time escaping it, win or lose. A central part of Kendrick's beef with Drake was the colonizer angle, calling Drake out for being inauthentic and not really part of the culture. And then he has a bunch of white and Mexican rappers on his new album, one of which is Peso, this Mexican rapper who's on the title track from GNX, and he literally rips the N-word in every song he makes. But Drake can't say it? Kendrick called out Drake for being misogynistic, and then he has Kodak Black, a convicted rapist, all over Mr. Morale. He brings out Dr. Dre, a guy with a decades-long history of violence against women, on stage at his Victory Lap show. You can't go into a battle where you try to reveal every mistake someone else has ever made, point out every flaw in their being, and not have that light turned back on you. Even now, Kendrick's new album GNX is under more scrutiny than ever before because people want to know if him destroying Drake will actually hold up. Because even though Kendrick hates Drake and Drake hates Kendrick, What they've done is make sure that now they can't ever be separated. No one will ever listen to anything Kendrick makes from now on without wondering if it's about Drake or if it's as good as what Drake is making. And the same goes for Drake. He'll never be able to speak in public again without people hanging on to his every word to see if he's dropping a salty sneak diss about Kendrick. His next album, the one after that, the one after that, they're all going to be seen in the light of his beef. And so while they might hate each other with every core of their beings, in a way they've both cursed themselves to never escape each other's shadows, not being able to do anything without it being brought back to their beef and compared to each other for the rest of their careers. But at least Kendrick has the sense to keep it pushing and focus on his own shit instead of filing petitions that essentially do nothing but remind the world that he lost for a second time, making him look like more of a petty, sore loser than ever before. And don't forget, my newest pendant, Chaos, is now available at spiritworld.store with free shipping in the US. And since you watched this far in the video, I'll let you guys know we're currently doing a buy one, get one half off deal only till the end of the month, so hop on that now before it goes away forever. That's spiritworld.store for some of the highest quality solid silver hand-painted pendants you can find anywhere.